What's up, everyone? It's already time for round number 3 of the Supercross series. We're heading back to Anaheim this week. Normally, by the time we get to round 3 of the series, we're starting to see what the picture of the series should look like and see where everyone is settling in. But it seems like going into this round, we have more questions than answers. We have 8 guys on the injury report to talk about. There is 3 new 250 West riders jumping into the series. And on top of that, now it looks like we might have to deal with some weather issues. There's a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. All right, the first thing we got to talk about is our injury updates, and unfortunately, we are starting to get quite the laundry list of riders that are injured.
It's quite a laundry list.
So the first rider we're going to talk about is Joe Shimoda. So we saw Joe get hit by Cody Schock's pit board at San Diego. That did end up breaking a couple of his fingers, and his pinky finger, which took the brunt of it, looked exceptionally gnarly. Really hate that for Joe. My first thought after seeing his hand was, man, he's going to have surgery. That thing is displaced. It's looking gnarly, but supposedly it's not displaced and he's not going to go get surgery. It looks like Joe's just going to tough it out and do his best. Luckily, he only has one more round after this, and then he gets a little bit of a break as we switch over to the East Coast. It will be interesting to see how he handles the Triple Crown next weekend. Technically, they are shorter main events, but in general, he's going to be on the track a little bit longer due to having to race 3 main events. But for now, he's just got to get through Anaheim 2, try to stay healthy. Hopefully, the weather holds up relatively good and he won't have to deal with that on top of his injury. But either way, he's just going to be hanging on out there. Next, we got to talk about the Pro Circuit guys, and man, does it suck to see that the Pro Circuit curse is still in effect.
It has to be a curse.
So we saw Ty Masterpool kind of overshoot that rhythm section last week, and he ended up going down. We don't have any official confirmation on his exact injuries, but we know for sure that he will be sitting out at least a couple of rounds. Hopefully he can come back after the East swing, but as of right now, he's definitely out. Speculatively, it sounds like he injured his hand. So hopefully it is a relatively minor injury and Ty can come back out and get back to racing, like I said, after the East swing. And then as far as Garrett Marchbanks, it sounds like he did go down in San Diego and he did tweak his shoulder, but now there's some speculation that he ended up injuring himself during the week. We're still waiting to hear something official from the team as far as what happened and if he'll be racing or not. And then we have another factory rider who is potentially going to be missing this week, and Stylez Robertson. So he's been off to a pretty rough start to his season. Obviously, we didn't get to see him at all last year. He switched over to Triumph, and it was going to be interesting to see exactly how he's able to come out. And unfortunately, he's been off to a rough start. Like I said, he only scored a couple of points at the opening round of the series. And if you didn't notice, he was pretty much non-existent in San Diego. So he ended up casing that triple quad section at San Diego, and it sounds like he might have re-injured that same arm that he's been dealing with for the last year or so. The full extent of his injuries are not really clear at this point. But unfortunately, it looks like he's probably going to be missing the race this weekend in Anaheim. Next, we got to talk about the AEO KTM guys. And unfortunately, Talon Hawkins and Avery Long both suffered injuries last weekend. It looks like Talon Hawkins probably got the worst of it. He did end up breaking his femur, so obviously he's going to be out for quite some time. And then Avery Long, we saw him go down in that LCQ. It looked pretty bad, and he did end up suffering a concussion, and he's also pretty bruised up. So don't look for him to be competing this weekend, but at least he's able to be up on his feet and walking, and hopefully he'll be back soon. And one last 250 injury update with Noah Viney. He did end up going down and dislocating his shoulder last week. I don't expect to see him this weekend, but it's definitely possible. Unfortunately, I gotta add one more rider to the injury list. As I was recording this video, it came out that unfortunately Ryder Difrancesco is also going to be out this week. And it sounds like for the foreseeable future, I guess he crashed at RD Field, and things don't really sound like they're that great for him. We don't have very many specifics on exactly what he's dealing with, but it doesn't sound good. It sounds like it was a pretty big deal. Definitely not going to be racing this weekend, and I don't expect him to be back anytime soon. And then I also just want to give a quick shout out to Billy Laninovich. We did talk about him in last weekend's race day updates. He did end up going down and injuring his ribs in San Diego, but it looks like he's going to give it another go this week in Anaheim 2. He is on the entry list, so keep your eye out for him. He was able to make the main events last year, and if he can do that again this year, then he will extend his record as far as being the oldest guy to ever make a Supercross main event. So hopefully he can get that going, but either way, look for him this weekend. Moving on to the 450 class, thankfully the list is a lot shorter. Obviously, we're still waiting for Christian Craig to recover from that ACL reconstruction that he had, and he's still going to be out for the foreseeable future. And then we did see Aaron Plessinger have to pull off in the main event last week as well. It sounds like he was also a victim of casing that triple quad section. Look for him to be back this weekend, but probably a little bit sore and banged up. And then we have a slew of the guys who have been sick. They should be starting to feel better, but it's going to be interesting to see if anybody else caught that thing that's been going around and maybe they'll be sick this weekend. But the riders that we know that are coming off of being sick that might be still trying to recover would be Cooper Webb, Ken Roczen, Jason Anderson, and Hunter Lawrence. Next, we're going to go over our top contenders and kind of paint the picture of exactly the way things are looking as we come into round number 3 as far as the points and just the way everyone's heading. So at the top of the 250 class point standings, we have Julien Beaumer, and he actually has 47 points. Obviously, he's only left 3 points on the table so far, so absolutely off to a great start to his season.
Good job, kid.
It's really cool to see the progression that he's made from last season to this season. We did see him get off to a good start to a season last year, but it definitely didn't really stick. We had those mud races, and he just didn't really seem the same after Anaheim won. So it was really cool to see him come out and back out his good performance at Anaheim 1 with his first ever win last weekend at San Diego. Now it's going to be really interesting to see how he backs that up now that he's the points leader and has the red plate. Not only does he have the red plate, but he also has a pretty significant points lead over Jordon Smith, who's 5 points back in second, and he has not been able to beat Julien Beaumer either round. So I'm sure Julien Beaumer still respects him, but at the same time, I don't think that he's the person he's most worried about. He's essentially been right behind Julien in both races and been unable to pass him. So I feel like Julien probably feels like he has got him covered for the most part. Then behind Jordon Smith, we have Joe Shimoda, who is now 7 points back after that unfortunate pitboard incident. He's definitely still in this thing, but he's definitely going to need to at least get some top 5 finishes in the next 2 rounds. It really sucks that he was able to kind of break that slow start to a season thing that he had going for the last few years. And then at the second round, he got clipped by a pitboard, and now that's basically making him have that same slow start that he always does. So if you're Julien Beaumer, I would kind of look at Joe Shimoda as a non-factor at this point too, knowing that his finger is completely jacked and it's going to be pretty much impossible for him to keep pace with me. And then in fourth, we have Haiden Deegan, who is 10 points down behind Julien Beaumer. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Haiden comes out this weekend. He's definitely looked good, and he does seem to be the fastest guy in general. I think that you could definitely argue that Julien Beaumer has been faster, but I also think you could argue that Haiden has been faster. It's really close between those two guys as far as these first 2 rounds. One thing you can't argue is that Julien Beaumer has been better. He's been significantly better, getting better starts, being more consistent, winning qualifying, and thus he is your red plate holder. So can Deegan turn the tables and come out swinging, get a good start, and get a win this weekend? Or will Julien Beaumer extend his points lead and start to really gain some confidence? Right now, Haiden is only 10 points back, so it's definitely a surmountable distance. But if Julien Beaumer continues to extend that points lead and the races start to run out, how soon does the pressure really begin to build on Haiden? And then right behind Haiden, off to a quiet but good start, we have Ryder Difrancesco, who is 12 points back. So technically, he's still right in the thick of this points battle as well. He hasn't really shown the outright speed to hang with any of these top 4 guys, but he also looks really solid. So it'll be interesting to see if he makes any improvements throughout the season. Right now, it seems like he's just that top 5 guy who's just going to be right there in 5th unless somebody else makes a mistake. But there are also some other guys who are kind of lurking outside that top 5 who look like they could get in there as well, like Cole Davies and maybe Cody Schock, who we'll talk about in just a second. But as far as Ryder Difrancesco goes, it's going to be important for him to stay healthy, get some good results, and try to secure himself a ride for next season. And as of right now, he looks to be doing just that. Then behind him, we have 2 riders tied for 6th, and that would be Cole Davies and Cody Schock. Both have looked really good for their own reasons. Cody Schock definitely doesn't have the flash or outright speed of Cole Davies, but he's been rock solid and consistent in the same way that he was last season, and that got him 3rd overall in the championship. So it'll be interesting to see how he builds throughout the season. Will he start to get closer and closer to that podium as these guys make mistakes or get injured and fall out of the series? Or will he just be that solid top 7, top 5 guy all season long? And then we got to talk about Cole Davies, who's been getting absolutely rocket starts, and he honestly looked like he could win that main event last week until he started making mistakes and then eventually ended up fading back a little bit, but he still finished strong and was able to finish in the top 5. Honestly, one of the best rookie seasons, at least start to a season that I've seen in a while that comes to mind. I'm really excited to see how he does this weekend, and at this point, I don't see how you could count him out as a race winner. Next, I want to go ahead and jump over to the 450 class. So at the top this weekend, we now have the veteran, everyone's favorite, Eli Tomac with 42 points, only 1 point ahead of Chase Sexton. So I have to say, Eli Tomac is definitely looking a little bit better than I expected this season. I did expect him to come out swinging and look pretty good, but man, he looks absolutely awesome out there. I think you could argue that he looks better than he's ever looked. And that was probably one of the highest, if not the highest intensity Supercross races that I've seen or that comes to mind. We've seen really intense moments, but that intensity and that level of speed that they carried through the entirety of that main event was absolutely insane. We saw Eli Tomac absolutely slice through the field at round number 1, and he did the same thing at round number 2, but he didn't have to come from dead last. So it's going to be interesting to see if anyone can stop him this weekend. Personally, I would pick him to win over Jett by just a little bit. And then, as I mentioned, Chase is right behind him, only 1 point back. So both of these guys went down early in each of the opposing rounds, and both of them came back through the field. But Chase's mistake did feel a little bit different. He was riding pretty sketchy on that opening lap. We saw what happened with him trying to double that triple, almost get landed on by Dylan Ferrandis, and he did not do himself any favors to not get landed on with the way he handled that double. He looked over to the left to make sure he was clear, and Dylan Ferrandis came down on his right. So super sketchy moment for Chase. Thank God he's all right. It was almost another SMX type deal where Justin Barcia landed on him. That would have been absolutely catastrophic for him to go out in the second round like that. So really happy to see that that didn't happen. And then he ended up tucking the front in the next turn after that. And I think you could argue that he made a pretty big mistake at round number 1. It just didn't cost him when he stalled. So kind of concerning that Chase is making these types of mental errors. He definitely has the speed to win. Obviously, he's already won, so we saw that. You could argue that the next 2 fastest guys that would be with him both crashed on the first lap, the round that he won. So he hasn't really proven himself to go toe-to-toe with either Jett or Eli yet, but it does feel like he can do it. Either way, he's only 1 point back, so as of right now, he's absolutely right in the thick of it. And then in third, we got to give a shout out to Ken Roczen. He's only 2 points back. How cool would it be to see Ken Roczen have an absolutely great ride this weekend and go into the 4th round of the championship holding the red plate? Definitely not something that is high on the possibility of scenarios, but with him only 2 points back, if he wins tonight, he will be your championship points leader. Personally, I would absolutely love to see that. Hopefully he can at least get a good finish and stay in the thick of this championship points battle, but either way, it's great to see Ken off to a good start. And then we have Cooper Webb. He is in 4th, but he's only 4 points back. So he's been sneaky good and he looks dangerous, especially the fact that he's only 4 points back after having 2 semi-mediocre finishes. They were not bad, not good. He didn't come out looking nearly as flashy as he did last year at Anaheim 1. And he looked to be turning that around last weekend with a good start, but unfortunately he was severely under the weather, and as the main event went on, he just was not able to hold on, and honestly I don't think he had the outright speed regardless to hold off those 2. But I did find it encouraging that he was only 12 seconds back at the end of the race, and that was with Jett and Eli pushing all the way to the finish, considering that they were so close to one another, and he really had no reason to push that hard. And if you consider the fact that he was severely sick, I really don't think he's that far off on speed. So once we get to the East Coast and we're more in his racing conditions, I feel like on a good night, he could have the outright speed to just win regardless. Maybe we even see a little bit of that tonight if we get some moisture and the track ruts up. Then in 5th, in a very similar situation to Haiden Deegan, we have Jett Lawrence, who is also 10 points back. So considering the absolutely catastrophic start that he had to a season, being only 10 points down at this point really doesn't feel that bad. It would be fun to speculate on all the hardships that he's going to have to overcome and how hard it's going to be for him to get to the lead, but honestly, we really can't do that. It looks like he could still be the best rider even after that catastrophic start that he had to the season. I do have a feeling that he could be the race winner tonight, even though I would pick Eli over him, but it would not be by much. I definitely think that Jett is looking good. Then behind him in 6th, we have Justin Barcia, who is 12 points back. And then as we look down the rest of the top 10, every single rider remaining through the top 10 is only 1 point behind the rider in front of him. So the differential from 1st to 10th in the championship right now is only separated by 16 points. Just to give you the full readout on the rest of those guys, in 7th we have Jason Anderson, 8th Hunter Lawrence, 9th Malcolm Stewart, and 10th Justin Cooper. If any of those guys have a good night or a bad night, they're going to definitely rise and fall dramatically in the points championship. Personally, I look for Jason Anderson to definitely bounce back this weekend. He had a pretty rough ride last week. He finished outside the top 10, and it sounds like he really fell off as the main event went on due to his illness. Like I mentioned in the injury updates, he was pretty sick last week, so hopefully the week has given him a little bit of rest and he's feeling significantly better. I definitely consider him a top 5 contender and a podium threat. Maybe not week in and week out, but look for him to be a lot better. But I think you could also make the same argument for Hunter Lawrence and Malcolm Stewart, who are behind him in the points. Hunter Lawrence was also sick and he managed to salvage a top 5 after his rough round 1. The thing with Hunter is he generally does get good starts, so that does put him in a slightly more advantageous position than Jason Anderson. And then Malcolm Stewart, we saw him go down pretty hard at Anaheim 1. He had to go through that LCQ. Things were looking pretty rough, and he managed to salvage a 10th place finish. And then last weekend, he finished in 7th. So he's definitely trending upwards. We know that he can have the speed, and he did finish 3rd overall in the Supercross Championship a few years back. So we know that he knows how to go the distance. Look for him to build as the season goes on as well. Now, I do want to talk about the takeaways that we have after seeing press day, but first let's just quickly talk about the weather. So thankfully, we've been able to have a couple of dry races, and the weather's been pretty good compared to last season. It's actually been exceptionally dry, especially with the high winds we've been having and the lack of rain. It seems like Dirtworks has been doing a good job of getting moisture into the dirt, but it's going to be interesting to see how they play it this weekend, knowing that there is some rain in the forecast. At the time of this recording, there is a 50% chance of rain on Saturday, but interestingly, the majority of that percentage comes right at 5 o'clock, and opening ceremonies is at 5, and race start is at 5:30. So knowing how the weather is, I would generally predict that it's probably not going to be a factor. If anything, the rain will probably push back and end up not really raining at least until Sunday, or we might just get a little bit of precipitation, but nothing that's a huge factor. But there is still that chance that it ends up raining right during the heat races and into the main event, which will be interesting to see. And it'll be interesting to see how Dirtworks plays it during the day, knowing that we're coming off of a really windy week. And then add to that that Monster Jam was just driving all over this dirt the weekend before. Generally, you'd want to work a lot of moisture into the dirt, but that could be kind of a tough call to make. And then if we end up getting some rain or a decent amount of rain, then that could really end up biting you. Either way, it should be pretty interesting to see. Like I said, if I had to predict, if anything, it's probably just going to be more of a nuisance that, gets on your goggles and causes a little bit of a slick layer, if anything. But I definitely don't expect a full mutter. Anyways, moving on to what we learned from press day. So we know that there is a few guys joining the series. That would be Enzo Lopes, who's going to be riding for the Bar X team. So really interesting to see that. He is still dealing with those nerve issues in his arm. It sounds like he had already undergone an arm pump surgery once before, and then once he joined Star Yamaha, he got some Botox injections to try to help with that when he joined Star Yamaha, and it absolutely ruined his nerves and pretty much everything. He said he couldn't even move his fingers and things like that. So thankfully he's able to at least get back on the bike, but he admits that really he doesn't think he'll ever feel the same. Kind of crazy, but either way, he'll be out there. And then we also get to see the pro debut, or at least the pro supercross debut of Drew Adams, and he will be the sole pro circuit Kawasaki rider out there. So kind of a crazy situation for him. Hopefully he can stay safe. Obviously, we've seen the first 3 guys on that team that tried to race the West Series not make it through the first 2 rounds. Well, Marchbanks did, but kind of not really, he was still kind of injured, but now he's really injured. Either way, please stay safe out there, Drew Adams. We're really excited to see what you can do. And then we're also getting back Derek Kelley, who went down pretty hard at Anaheim 1, and we never actually got to see him race. So that's also another good thing. We are definitely losing the depth to this field pretty quickly, so having a few guys coming back or joining the series is definitely nice to see. Also, I just want to quickly mention that it was confirmed in press day that Joe Shimoda was planning on riding press day, but he did opt out of that. He's just going to hold out for practice today on Saturday, and I'm just going to try to see how he feels. Hopefully he feels good enough to go out there and push through. Obviously, you would think he would feel good enough, having considered the fact that he just raced last weekend. But then again, that was the day that he injured himself. So since then, we've had a lot of time for swelling and the pain to really set in. I don't even think he took his glove off ever since he was injured. So probably, you know, just even stuff like trying to put a glove on, put a brace on, all this other stuff is just a lot harder after you've already been injured. So definitely not a given that he's racing tonight, but look for him to be out there and keep an eye on how he can perform. Hopefully we'll see him in the racing. We should know a lot more once we see qualifying. Looking at the guys riding in press day, it's pretty interesting to see them hitting the rhythm sections. There are quite a few different lines in that dog-legged rhythm section. They're getting some pretty big air in there, and it's hard to say exactly what the best line will be. It does look a little bit one-lined with the way that everyone kind of has to funnel to the inside as they go through that dogleg section of the rhythm section. But it is a fairly long rhythm section for a baseball field track. So definitely, I think you probably won't be able to pass per se through there, but you could probably make up some time and close in on somebody and try to make up a pass or set up a pass, especially with the back-to-back whoop sections later on in the track. And speaking of those back-to-back whoop sections, another really interesting thing about the track this weekend is that they went ahead and actually steamrolled one set of the whoops. So kind of an interesting move here from Dirtworks. We saw them steamroll the whoops in the Paris Supercross during the off-season, and there was a lot of talk about that and how good the whoop section looked. But there's a lot of differences between Paris Supercross and American Supercross. For one, the dirt is a lot different. The dirt here is a lot drier and just breaks down differently. And then we have a lot more riders on the track for a lot more time during the day. So definitely not a one-for-one comparison. But either way, they said, you know what, let's go ahead and steamroll them. Everyone's talking about it. But we're not going to steamroll this side, and we'll see which one does better. So personally, I'm really excited to see that they're at least willing to experiment with some changes. We saw 10 whoops last week, and now we have 18 whoops back to back, even though there's a berm splitting them. So not, you know, a super long whoop section, but definitely cool to see that. I feel like that's probably going to be one of the few passing points on the track, and it'll be really cool to see how those two break down throughout the day. And then other than that, I just want to mention that as you guys are listening to this, I'm probably either on my way or already at the stadium. I will be attending this round of Supercross, thankfully. So definitely keep your eyes peeled or tuned on the channel for any content that I can bring you guys. I'm going to do my best to bring you as much content as I can while I'm there. So keep your eyes out for that. That's going to go ahead and do it. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.